Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So in this video, I'm going to give you an overview of a typical design process that a UI UX designer or product designer is expected to follow. Your design process will be slightly different depending on your role, the team you are at, and also the company that you work in. Large companies often have different design teams across different products. If you join a large company, you may be expected to work on just one tiny part of the product instead of all of it. Your role will be more specialized in one product only. Whereas if you join a small company, you are expected to know each product inside out and you will be able to design cross-product. This is why some companies have teams doing only UX design, UI design, interaction design, or simply just prototyping only. So depending on which team you're at, which role you're at, your design process is going to be slightly different. So our design process is similar to that of a design thinking framework. This design thinking framework is pretty common and is popularized by IDEO, and you probably heard it many times over. If you Google design thinking or if you Google the UX design process, you will typically see images like this. A design thinking framework consists of 5 stages: discover, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So in my version of the process, it typically looks like this. You start with discovering, which is understanding the business, the users, and then you move on to defining the problem statement, which is to determine what problem that you're trying to solve before you even start designing. In the UX design process, it's really not fancy 5-stage diagrams that you see on the internet all the time. Sometimes you go back and iterate, and sometimes you may not need to go from stage 1 to stage 5. You may probably be able to start from ideation right away if you already have the problem statement defined beforehand. So stage 1, discover. User research consists of the first stage and the second stage. We are not our users. It doesn't give us the right to assume something that we think our users want, like a feature. We don't know the problem or the answer until we actually ask our users. There's also a myth that user research is expensive and time-consuming. Well, it doesn't have to be. I'm a big believer of simplifying processes. If you don't have the budget to do a full-fledged user research or hire a user research agency or build your own user research team, that is fine. You can still do it for free. And it can be done anytime and anywhere. Keep the end goal in mind. The purpose of this user research process is basically to understand your users, understand how can you help them solve a problem through your designs. There are different ways to conduct a user research. Depending on the method you use, the deliverables of the user research will also be different. Sometimes you could use the typical user research methods to get your problem statement defined already. You do not need to dive into super fancy, advanced user research methods all the time. Common user research methods can be split into 2, quantitative and qualitative. A typical quantitative research method is like a survey, where it's actually a questionnaire that you can send out to a large volume of users, gather their responses and analyze them later. Whereas for the qualitative user research method, there are many ways that we can do this. For example, user personas, jobs to be done framework, empathy mapping, user journey maps, affinity diagram, user interviews, usability testing, guerrilla testing, card sorting. The ones that I've just shared are one of the common ones that we use. The tools we use for research method varies depending on which method we use, and one of the common ones are Google Meet and Zoom for user interviews. When we do user interviews, we will set up a one-on-one call with the user. We will prepare a set of questions and tasks beforehand, and if we're doing some surveys, you could use free ways like Google Forms. You could send out a type form survey. You could also use Maze or build your own in-app survey. No matter what user research method that you use, ask open-ended questions. So if you ask users open-ended questions, they will be able to answer you something more elaborate. So yeah, this is stage 1 of the user design process, where we talk about discovering our users, understand them better, and sometimes we might uncover some learnings that we never expected. Next up, we will define the problem statement. The purpose of this stage is to find out what problem that you're trying to solve for your users. It will set the right mindset and expectations in later stages. This stage should not just fall on the designer. The stakeholders also play a part in defining the problem statement. It is a team effort. By stakeholders, I mean people like the business team, the marketing team, the product team, your product managers, product owners, and also the designer. And when a team works together to define a problem statement, it is more likely that we stay on track and not lose sight of the goal. As Charles Kettering once said, a problem well stated is half solved. A problem statement should be user-centric. It should help solve a problem that the user is facing. The problem statement should not be about product metrics, business metrics, or technology. Typically, in a problem statement, we can start off by saying how might we or what can we do to blah blah blah. For example, how might we increase the sales for our website versus how might we improve the shopping experience for our users. The latter is a better problem statement because it is user-centric. After the problem statement defining stage, we might probably find out that the problem statement isn't right, or we will need to go back and understand our users better. This is when we jump back to the first stage, which is the discover stage, and do it all over again. In the case where you finally have a problem statement that you're happy with, you move on to the most exciting stage, which is the ideation stage. This is the part where we go crazy, draft out-of-the-box design ideas, and the sky is the limit here. Some of the common ideation methods, again fancy buzzwords here, are crazy eights, sketching, user flow mapping, storyboarding, mind mapping. And then we move on to the prototyping stage. We can build a prototype in a design tool like Figma, which is pretty easy to do. It should take less than a day to build a prototype on Figma. You're not expected to spend days and days of prototyping because it could be expensive to do that and it's not effective. I will usually build mid-fidelity prototypes that is clear enough to help users understand what the design is going to look like, but not too high fidelity where every pixel is perfect. Once we have the prototype ready, this is when we test it. The sooner you test your prototypes, the sooner you will be able to understand how to improve your designs. So as I mentioned earlier, testing shouldn't be expensive and time-consuming. We can do this remotely. Before the testing, we will start by defining the questions that we are trying to ask and also the user task in a note-taking tool like Notion. Stakeholders can also come in and give input on what insights or questions they would like to find out during the test. We will also have a rough script ready so that we don't miss out anything during the test and to make sure that the prototype works exactly as expected. And once we're done, we basically just schedule a test with the user. During the testing, it will typically take from half an hour to 1.5 hours depending on what you are trying to test and also the scope. We will get the participants' consent that this session will be recorded. They will need to share their screen, turn on their video camera so that we can observe their expression. We will also give a brief introduction about why are we doing this, who are we, and what is expected of the user to do. For example, speaking their mind out loud. After the testing, we're just going to document those insights on Notion, summarize them, and present to our stakeholders so that everyone learns about what we found during the test. If it's a survey, we are going to summarize all the survey results and also present to the stakeholders. It is also normal to go back and iterate once you find out that after testing, there are things that we could improve on, or maybe the design is not going to solve the user's problem. The more you do this, the more you'll be more confident with your designs that it would truly solve the user's problem. For example, if the checkout experience is confusing to our users, at least during testing, we find that out quickly so that we don't have to risk having a bad user experience after launching it. This process seems tedious at first, but it is necessary to go through because it will save you a lot of time, headache, and money in the long run. Say now you already have designs that you are satisfied with and truly solves the user problems based on the testing results. And then we are going to prepare the designs for handoff on Figma. If there are animation-specific design specs, we are going to state that clearly in the design file. At this stage, we will also set up a call with our stakeholders and also the tech team. If it involves other teams, we are going to bring them in the call as well. And we'll walk through them the designs, the context on why are we doing this, maybe share a little bit on the test results. When you bring tech leads into the design process early on, they will be able to expect what's coming next and give their expert inputs on whether this design is technically feasible, and if not, how are we going to work together to solve this problem. In the meeting, if they have any questions, we are going to answer them as well so that everyone is clear and good to go. And then once we have handed off the design to development, we are going to continue to be on standby to answer any questions that the tech leads or the development team have found when they are inspecting our designs. We will then move on to test the designs in staging, which is similar to a production environment, but it is not out for the public. It is only for internal testing. If there are any UI or UX issues, it will be great to point that out as well. When we are done testing the product in staging, we are finally ready to launch the product. Post-launch, there are bound to be some bugs or feedback on how we can improve our experience. After launching the product, you can also ask questions like what worked, what didn't work, how are the users responding, and was the problem solved in the first place. If there are anything that we're unsure of and we need to validate, we will also implement A/B testing to test out which image or copy is more effective. This is the perfect time to also iterate on your product if there are any ways to improve it. One thing these stages have in common is constant communication and collaboration. When you Google the design process, you will find lots and lots of fancy methods and buzzwords or formulas even to have the perfect design process. But you do not have to follow all of them by the book. Pick and choose whatever works for you, as long as you make sure that you are really solving a real problem through design. Don't make assumptions about our users because again, we are not our users. At the end of the day, the goal is to design a great product that truly solves a problem. Frameworks are great, but don't follow blindly. I'm sorry that I couldn't dive into every single detail because each stage of the design process demands a video by itself, and I could go really deep into all these topics. But let me know what kind of topics that you would like to see in the comment section below. If you want to learn UI UX design, remember, learning paired with action brings you closer to your goals. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye!